Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Leeds City Council Scrutiny Board for Environment, Housing and Communities. My name is Councillor Stuart Galton. I'm chairing the meeting, and I'm just going to introduce, or they are going to introduce themselves, the members of this board.
Morning, everybody. Councillor Pauline Graham, Crossgates and Winmore Ward.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Javed Akhtar, Councillor for London and Woodhouse.
Morning all, Councillor Andy Rowntree representing Kirkstall.
Morning folks, Councillor Adrian McCluskey representing Farnley and Wortley Ward.
Hello, I'm Councillor Mahaley Frantzmere for Moortown and Meanwood, and today I'm substituting for Councillor Hannon.
Morning everyone, Councillor Annie Maloney, Beaton and Holbeck Ward.
Good morning everyone, Councillor Asghar Khan, Councillor for Bermutoffs and Richmond Hill Ward.
Good morning, Councillor Simon Seary from the Pudsey Ward.
Good morning, Councillor Penny Stables from Wetherby Ward.
Good morning, Councillor Norma Harrington from Wetherby Ward.
Good morning, Councillor Barry Anderson, Adlin Wharfdale Ward.
And over to Becky.
Apologies, Becky Atherson, Scrutiny Advisor.
Okay, thank you for your attendance today. We are now going to go straight into the items of business. First of all, item 1, appeals against refusal of inspection of documents.
There's no appeals today, Chair.
Second is items for exclusion.
There are no exclusions, Chair.
Any late items of business?
No late items today.
Members, do we have any declarations of interest today? No, thank you very much. Becky, I understand we have some apologies.
Yes, Chair, we have apologies from Councillor Hannon. Councillor Frantzmere is substituting. Councillor Harland and Liz Jarman have both sent apologies for item 7, and Councillor Tudor has also sent apologies via the Chair.
Thank you. On to item 6, which are the minutes of the last meeting. Any matters arising? No, none from the floor. I think it's worth noting minute 88 that we requested some information relating to void properties and also damp and mould repairs. And that information, I just wanted to mention formally, has been distributed to board members so that they can digest it for the next meeting. Okay, let's go on to our first discussion item, and that's item number 7, which is the Community Committee review. Today, we have several officers that are going to be helping us take this item forward, and I'll let them introduce themselves and give their role. Over to you, James.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. James Rogers, Director of Communities, Housing and Environment.
Morning, everybody. Paul Money, Chief Officer in the Safer Stronger Communities team.
Good morning, everyone. Rachel Marshall, Localities Programme Manager in the Communities team.
Thank you very much. You're all very welcome. Who'd like to lead off to introduce the item? We have, of course, as board members, all digested the content, but please offer your direction.
Thank you, Councillor Galton. I'll introduce the Community Committee Review Update Report in the absence of Councillor Harland, although Councillor Harland has asked me to pass on her thanks for the engagement from members on this particular piece of work. The report does detail that extensive participation and the process that has been or is being followed in terms of progressing the Community Committee Review. And there's been fairly universal support from members, either in terms of direct attendance at workshops or through other forms of engagement that have been exploited. The review has been set out with a focus on 4 particular key themes that have been subject of workshops. Those themes are detailed within the report, as is the progress made within each of those themes, covering the community committee champions, the delegated budgets, the engagement with the public and with the community, and also some work that's probably we're probably being steered in terms of a more longitudinal look at delegated functions, because of the nature of some of the feedback that's come back from members and the need to engage with other services. Governance around this whole process has been fairly consistent throughout, subject to any feedback today, in terms of the cross scrutiny member working group and the support through the workshops that I've just detailed, that we're working through. Our approach, I think, in terms of that work with members, has been very much focused on trying to set a framework for the conversations and the ideas from members to come to the fore, whilst you know, being focused, I think, in terms of allowing those conversations to come to fruition. There's a balance to be struck there, I guess, in terms of how well we've from an officer point of view steered the conversations, and no doubt there may be some feedback on that. But the sense we've got so far is really positive discussions. We're about to move into a kind of secondary phase, really, in terms of the review, which is focused on implementation of the recommendations. And the report details 3 task and finish groups which have been set up to assist with that process, and some additional work, as I've alluded to, around the delegated functions. I'll probably pause there, Chair, for fear of detailing too much in the report, and we're able to pick up any questions or queries if that's helpful.
Yes, thank you, Paul. That was really useful. I think there's quite a few lines of inquiry that members would like to take forward. Who would like to go first? Councillor McCluskey.
It was really from the first workshop that we did about the champions role, and I'd raised that I was anointed as a health champion for the Outer West without any induction or explanation about the role. In fact, the workshop produced a almost like a job description for the champion role, and that was the best document I'd read about. And it was more about are we developing an induction program, particularly for some people like me as a new member, about the value of the community committees and the roles within them. It was more about how is that going to be progressed.
I think we'd acknowledge that that's an area for us to develop, and not necessarily just within that particular champion role. I was speaking to some community safety champions earlier this week who were expressing some similar sentiments around how we might assist with supporting members discharge the functions in those particular roles. It very much has been picked up in the review. It's very much part of the recommendations that we're looking to progress. You make reference, Councillor, to induction programmes, and we've certainly got that in mind, as well as probably some ongoing progressive development over time. And looking more generally to build stronger links with officers and members in terms of how we can get the best from that partnership would be my initial response. I don't know, Rachel, whether you have anything else to add.
Yeah, I'd certainly agree, Councillor McCluskey, that it came through loud and clear through all the discussions that had, particularly around the champions roles, that members were keen to see real accountability and empowerment of that role, really. So I think there is some work to do with services around how we can make sure the support is there from the relevant service for that relevant champion role. And that, I think, will link through to those delegated function discussions as well. But we want to make sure that the champions feel valued and work more closely probably with the chairs as well around their roles and how they can progress them within the community committees that they work in for the best of their communities. So I think there's definitely work to do there, but it's certainly one of the major recommendations that we've got.
Councillor Stables.
Thank you, Chair. One of the themes that was discussed was around the fact that different community committees work in different ways in terms of either in person or online. And one of the discussions was that actually there's benefits of both. In the Outer North East, we meet here, and so we don't have the advantage in terms of location of people coming here from the community. But we were discussing the possibility of technology, and I don't know whether that's something that you're looking at, to enable committees to move around the different wards within their area and to be able to live stream as well as be in person.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. It's again, that's another issue that that has been very extensively kind of aired in our discussions, cross-cutting a number of the workshops, such as the nature of I think the desire to connect as well as we can with local residents for obvious reasons. I think in terms of kind of taking this forward, what we're really keen to do is to support members around driving consistency across community committees where that consistency makes sense in terms of good practice, but also recognising our areas are very different in terms of geography, and we need to also build into that arrangement sufficient flexibility for the right arrangements in particular areas. The technological opportunity that sits there in terms of the live streaming and the online, we think is absolutely fundamental in terms of 21st century communication with our residents. There are some issues to kind of work through for us in terms of our ability to deliver as quickly as we would like on that aspiration, but it's a key piece of work that we're taking forward with the right colleagues, with the right technical experience to guide us through that process. Sufficiently more technical experience and knowledge than I've got, but we are engaging with them, and we'll continue to engage with members as we move through that process, looking to get to the outcome that I think you're alluding to.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Chair. And as you know, the committee function is very, very important, and they are well bedded in local areas and within the organisation. My question is about communication. We don't get the numbers of residents attending our community committees as they should be, because there are some formal council business decision making takes place in those areas, and the residents should be getting involved. The question is about communication. Yes, we do communicate on the social media when the meeting is going to be taking place and the venues, but not everybody's are on the social media. My question is, what are the other methods that you use to communicate with the residents or inform them there's going to be a meeting taking place and the agenda has been set, how they get to know those kind of information?
Thank you, Councillor Khan. I think it's a fair point around the communications, and we know across the city that some community committees do have very low numbers, and it is looking at other ways in which we can engage with residents, and we can support you to have those. And I know ward members are not limited to community committees in terms of engagement with your residents through your various briefings and ward surgeries, etc., and forums, etc., in different community committee areas. So there is lots of opportunities for those conversations with communities to happen. Obviously, we promote through a mailing list of existing people that we know are interested in those meetings and organisations, and through social media. If we've got notice boards, obviously we try and put those up as well, notices around the meetings, to try and reach as many people as possible. I think there's also something about recognising the format of the meetings is perhaps not as user-friendly to the average person walking in off the street. There, as you say, there is quite a formality around the committees in terms of that governance side of it that has to be operated in a certain way, but we are that's come through the workshops around how we look at the format of the meetings, and is there something that we can do to make it a more interactive meeting where members of the public can have more of a say around the issues that are important to them that you're raising at community committees, but because of the format it makes it difficult for interaction to take place. So I think there's a twofold around how we promote the meetings, but also what the meetings fundamentally are about, and what you as members of those committees and the chairs are actually trying to do there. And obviously it's linked to the IT discussions as well around different opportunities around how people can hear what's important and what's being discussed.
Thank you. So it's still an area of development. Councillor Rowntree.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've already touched on the tension, I suppose, between the notion of best practice and the best way of doing things, and respect for sort of autonomy, and the fact that each committee is represents a different area and may over time have developed a different way of doing things. I'm wondering if from the stage you're at the moment, if there's anything you can pull out as strands that you think sort of warrant a recommendation. This is the best way of doing it. This is sort of something that we'd like to see sort of spread widely across practice, that kind of thing. Any themes that are like strike was good ways or better ways of doing things than we have at the moment. Thank you.
I think in terms of the stages that we're at, there's certainly been some interesting insights provided about what works well in some community committee areas and what maybe doesn't work well in others. I'm not sure necessarily if all of that is simply transferable. Going back to that dichotomy around looking to drive consistency ways of working where it makes sense to, but also recognizing, we are talking about a really large city with different population groups and different issues and challenges in terms of going back to Councillor Khan's point about the reach to that particular population group. What we would be really keen to do is continue to use the governance arrangements that we've put in place in terms of the working group and the 3 task and finish groups to properly unpick with members what that practice looks like before we'd be in a position, I think, certainly at this stage, to be advocating what looks good, bad, or indifferent. There's some things in there that seem to strike a chord with us. We'll bring those to the fore in the task and finish groups, but then I think it's critically important that we do what we tried to do all along: is get your feedback on it in those groups, because you've as good a perspective on this as any of us have. So it's not so much sitting on the fence. There's obvious things to talk about, Councillor Rowntree, without a doubt, but they probably want to be explored in a bit more detail, and those are the arrangements that we put in place to do that.
Thank you. I mean, I think one of the things that's sort of particularly on my mind is the whole architecture around financial decisions and grant awarding, which obviously is it takes up a large part of meetings, and it's very important that it's done correctly and transparently. On the other hand, it is possibly not so engaging as a more free format discussion might be for members of the public who attend. So I'm hoping that there's sort of something that we can sort of draw out in that area to take some of the time away from the formal meetings in terms of their financial decisions. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I think that is definitely an issue, particularly I think it's the start of the year, where I know a lot of applications are coming through to committees for approval. What we found is some committees have pre-finance meetings, and we've found that to be quite useful in terms of that discussion taking place between members and looking at organisations and seeing if there is any other sort of funding that can be brought in. That, we all know the pressures of well-being reducing year on year. So that has been useful, I think, where you can obviously still approve and do still approve at community committee in the right way, so that it's all transparent, so there's no decisions being made, but that discussion element can be a meeting the week before or a couple of days before to try and iron some of those out and reduce the time at the actual meeting of having those discussions there, so you can leave more time for discussion on other matters that you might want to look at. So it's a thought, and some committees do that, but it's not universal.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Councillor Franz Meer.
Hello. Thank you for the report. It was a really interesting read. I also want to just say thank you for the workshops, the community committees workshops. They were really good, well put together. And a lot of organic discussions came from between officers and members, which was really, really nice and quite healthy and quite beneficial. One of my questions was about communication and the reach of that communication. And like Councillor Khan mentioned about different areas have different needs, and there is digital, poverty going on across the city. The officers that work within the community committees team, they work so hard, and what I felt came out from some of those workshops that they were already at capacity of trying to do everything they could do within getting a wider reach and so on. And one thing I did put forward is the fact that we have a city comms team, and we should be perhaps promoting the community committees meetings through the wider distribution of, on the website, but not just on the website, through the various digital channels that we've got going on to increase that reach. Because it may be the fact that someone lives in one area of Leeds who lives in a completely different area from their parents, and they might want to just pop along to say something that affects them in that locality. So it was more of a suggestion, not really a question, about using the wider infrastructure rather than having all the work placed on the community committees team, because they already do a fantastic job. But again, the workshops were good as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. Probably best to answer that, because that's thanks to you, Rachel, isn't it? And the work that you and other colleagues are doing. I think that's a really good suggestion. It is something that we've picked up. There's a more broader agenda that we're just looking at in terms of thinking about how we harness a wider contribution of support to community committees from across the council than necessarily the dedicated function from the team that Rachel's part of. Because you're right, there's a pressure there in terms of the resourcing. We do think, in terms of taking forward some of the recommendations, there may be opportunities for officers to do less of some things and more of others. Thinking about that challenge around some of the more bureaucratic processes that we could maybe streamline. So there might be some opportunities in terms of that. But the broader point that you make around comms and engagement and utilising the skills and expertise that sits across the council is a really, really good one. And I kind of was just thinking about Councillor Khan's earlier point about I think one of the opportunities there is to maybe think about that universally, but also to work with local members about what you think the best ways to reach residential populations are, picking up on your point about some of the distinctions around access to digital, for instance. So I think our approach would be one centred around doing that with you. But in terms of that wider comms link, I think there are opportunities there for us to exploit.
Councillor,
Sorry, thank you. Yeah, definitely. You didn't like putting it on X and so on, but having the agendas on there as well, so people know what they can be having a look. But also perhaps changing some of our communication channels, because Facebook and X are only for a certain demographic, whereas you've got Insta and it's Snappy Chatty, whatever it's called, that the fact that we do have young persons, we do want representation from younger people to attend these meetings, or if not, just being able to have the confidence just to say, look, I'd be interested in this for our area and our community. We want a skateboard park where the parents can just run them off to A&E, like whatever parent wants, sit there for hours. But it's creating those opportunities to have that ask and making it less, making it easier rather than making it more of a hurdle. Thank you.
Councillor Graham.
Thank you. I'd first of all like to thank you both for your support. And I've chaired the Outer East Community Committee for quite a few years now. And it's quite interesting to hear the comments because our community committee meetings are advertised. We cover Crossgates and Winmore, Kippax and Methley, Garforth and Temple Newsham. And you can advertise as much as you like, but some wards you do not get a good attendance. And we've found, as you know, you've been to, I won't name the ward, but we're lucky if we get any residents, and they're advertised on the community committee site. We put posters round, we do everything. So a lot of it's down to your chair as well, I'm say, because you know, working with, but the young groups should be invited, all the groups should be, youth groups, the nursery ones, everything. I'm sure Norma, you do at yours. So it depends on how you work it yourself in the chairs and the members, and financially, any grants that are applied for, any funding, that should be sent out to the members to approve online first, and then it's approved at the meeting. So it's not just opened up at the meeting. So I'd like to support you and the officers. No, thank you. But you can some advertise all you like and you won't get anybody there. Thank you.
Thank you. On that issue, there is, in terms of popular participation, so far the workshops have been focused on elected members and they offer their experience as community representatives. Well, how are we planning in the future to put the community in community committees? Because policy is being encouraged to take on board lived experience, isn't it? Which is interesting in terms of policy in different areas, but in terms of how people feel engaged within their community, we depend as councillors mostly on anecdotal experience of ourselves as councillors. How are we going to gather in that richness in terms of knowledge and experience to look at how we develop the community locality offer in the future to make sure that we're responding more to the needs of different diverse elements of the community, as opposed to the 9 to 5 councillor and officer needs Monday to Friday. Do you see what I mean? How do we widen it up to think actually what we're offering isn't that good, and that's why people aren't really interacting with it?
I think I kind of bought Councillor Galton, if you don't mind me saying it, the 9 to 5 officer comment there, but I know what you mean. And apologies for going off at a tangent there. I think that is a really good point. I think we're certainly looking to secure pretty much in all the community-facing work that we are involved in, every opportunity to secure that lived experience, the voice of local people, as you describe it, Councillor Galton. I think going back to the point that was, I think, first made by Councillor Khan around engagement with local communities, I think there is some significant work to do on that particular agenda, and I think it's probably an area of work where we've got marginal gains to make in a number of different areas. So I'd start with the categorization of these as community committee meetings. I don't know how, in the first instance, attractive that is to local people. I kind of always test these things out on my mum and dad, and I'm not sure they'd grasp that straight away. But they are very much interested in what's happening in Middleton, where they live. And I think there's something about that reach to local people. There's something, as has been touched on, about the communication. I think, as well as we've touched on, how we make those agendas more relevant to local people, recognizing that there's governance and other issues that we do need to take care of in an appropriate way. So I think it's looking at this in a number of different areas, and thinking about remembering about what they're actually there for. And it is, and I know it's very much central to the work that you're doing in local communities, is wanting to reach local residents in as effective a way as we can. And I guess what we've seen is there are some areas where that's working quite well. There are other areas where it could be improved. I think the issue then is just unpicking some of those areas that we've talked about. There will be more. I know from a local perspective, Rachel, you've also got some ideas on this, but I think there's a range of things to look at here and look to progress.
Yeah, I mean, from the engagement and empowerment workshop that we did, one of the particular strands that we're looking at was looking at the structure of community committees to allow for meaningful engagement. And I think that comes back to what you're saying, Councillor Galton, in terms of what are the important issues for the communities and the wards that make up those community committees. And how can community committees facilitate some of those conversations to happen? We know there are people out there who are active in our communities and doing fantastic work. They don't always attend community committees, though. It doesn't stop them doing amazing work in the communities. And I think from our team, we probably know most of those people, as do you. And we work closely with them behind the scenes, but not necessarily community committees aren't the only way of engaging with them and having meaningful conversations. I think we have to recognise that we're not trying to make community committees a catch-all, but I think it is looking with the working group and with members as we have these workshops of ongoing task and finish groups, I should say, to work out what is going to be the best way forward and how we can make those committees as engaging and as interesting as we can for local people to encourage them, but recognising it's not the be all and end all.
Councillor Graham.
Thank you. Just to comment there, well, that can come down to the agenda, because on the agenda you'd have something that's the most relevant, like and we move around the wards, the meeting. So when we're in Crossgates and Winmore, we'd have them from the ELAW development to come. So that's the thing, and advertise it that's for the local area, which we do, I'm sure others do. Thank you.
Councillor Stables.
One of the things that I know has been mentioned is linking more effectively with the third sector. And what the question I wanted to ask actually was about community anchors. Now, I didn't find out, I was saying actually, I didn't find out about these for probably 6 months into the role. I didn't know they existed. So we can hardly be the link with them, with our community, if we don't even know they exist. So it would be, I think it would be really good if we were able to get those to come along to the meetings and discuss the role and that way as well engage others within the community to come and understand how it all fits together, how it all works together. I don't know if that's on your plans.
I think as an officer working within the communities team, we work quite extensively with the Leeds community anchors. And this goes back to the COVID days, the dark days when we were setting up those organisations to become what are now the Leeds community anchor network. And I think there is probably more that we could do to link in with them. They are becoming more of a force to be reckoned with, and I think they are finding their feet over the last year or so as to what they want to be and how they want to progress. But I think if there was an interest from members around a conversation coming to community committees from those Leeds community anchors, I'm sure we could facilitate that. And it's something we can take through the chairs forum, perhaps at the next one, to say, is there an appetite to do that? And let's get them on the agenda. That's certainly something we can work with them with. Thank you.
Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Chair. Just briefly, what I wanted to ask has been covered. Just briefly, I just want to say we're really proud of our city, actually, with the diversity and the multicultural and different communities. And when we're communicating, I think it's really important that we need to use the simple languages Normally, the council language I can't understand sometimes as well, though, get me wrong, but imagine somebody who's new to the country, English is not their first language. I think that's really, really important. When we want to communicate with our residents, we need to use a simple language.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that possibly links back to the format again of the community committees potentially being a little bit off-putting in terms of the language, etc., that's used. I know we've worked with some very diverse communities, as you know, within our team, and we support them the best way we can in terms of those link anchor organisations within those areas to make sure we've got the reach. We don't always have the language, etc., within our team to be able to do that, but we generally know those people in the communities that have that reach and have those relationships. So we work with yourselves and with those to try and reach them. But I think, yeah, the language and the culture issues that can sometimes be a barrier to accessing some of the council services we know about, and we obviously do our best to try and manage that and improve all the time on where we can do that. And if we, if members have got suggestions about how we can improve, we're always here to listen and take that on board. We recognise it's a changing face of our city over the past 10-20 years, and we have to move with the times and take that into account.
If I can just for a sec just kind of build on that, I think I'm conscious in particular, Councillor Khan, about a recent event that we were at with a group at the AGM, and I necessarily need to name them, but I think there's, going back to Rachel's point about how we do this, how we do open up these arrangements so that they're more attractive. I think there may be some work for us to think about doing in support of local members, going out to different population groups, different area meetings, just to talk and build on those relationships that already exist. And I know that the session that you and I were in with Councillor Farley, I think was really helpful in terms of providing an insight into not only the work that we're talking about doing here, but the intent behind it in terms of supporting local people. So I think that strikes back to Rachel's point about community committees not necessarily being the be all and end all. And even if that's the longer term aspiration in terms of connections there, I think there's work we'd be keen to support members with in terms of local community engagement opportunities to maybe provide that insight that some of the new population groups coming to Leeds perhaps just don't understand.
Just as a final comment, there is reference in the report to asset-based community development. And the last time it got reported back to us, it talked about how at one of the workshops that you'd gathered the mentioning of the concept as being something that meant that members needed to get training in asset-based community development, and then members corrected the officers at the time to say, no, we mentioned it because some departments of the council don't get it. And if they don't get it, then they can't live it or use it in terms of how they develop their policies. So in this report, we recognise actually you've said certain frontline departments where appropriate might need training. Now that just feels a little qualified. And actually, I think the Scrutiny Board might agree that asset-based community development should be at the heart of all of our council services, especially at a point where we're trying to achieve more with less resource. So we should be maximising the natural resource of our populations to deliver benefits for the neighbourhoods where they live. So, sorry, that was a bit of a mini speech. So what I'm asking is, would you like our help to talk to other parts of the council to get their understanding of how asset-based community development could be translated within the services that they deliver? Would that help you take that forward? Because it has been pointed out already, you've got quite a lot on your plate already in terms of quite a small team delivering quite a bit. Would that be helpful?
I think the short answer to that would be, and it's entirely consistent with how we've tried to do this work anyways, is work with members on this particular agenda. And I think that suggestion, once we've had the opportunity to think it through and talk it through with members, Councillor Galton, around that co-producted bit of work with council departments where appropriate, and potentially indeed even conversations more broadly than that, thinking about what's been referenced already with the third sector, links to community committees, is something we would look to progress.
And just to to link into that, I have been in touch with the ABCD team. We are getting a meeting in the diary to discuss what, if any, is the offer to services at the moment, so that we can kind of map what's currently happening and see where the probably significant gaps are in terms of that.
Okay, thank you. I think that's a very good point to pause our discussion, and we look forward to your next visit so that we can look at more conclusive aspects to the work that we've done jointly. So thank you very much for your attendance. It's much appreciated. We'll move on to our next item, and we'll just allow the officers to establish themselves changeover-wise. This is the report which is coming from the environment section and is the Parks and Green Space Strategy Annual Update. We have Polly Cook with us and Emma Trickett, as well as James Rogers as director. You're very welcome. Who would like to introduce the report?
Yeah,
Emma.
I'll do that. Sorry, just working out the technology. As you're aware, it's very wide reaching. So I'm going to be quite brief in the introduction and then leave plenty of time for questions. So basically, the report provides an update on progress with delivering the actions set out in the Parks and Green Spaces strategy. It's our second annual update since the strategy was published in February 2022, and it covers the calendar year 2023, so January to December 2023. The report itself provides some highlights from the service from 2023, like the significant investment through external funding in parks and green spaces, so things like improving play paths, provision of benches and sports facilities. And it also proposes some changes to the strategy, mainly new actions to help us deliver the goals that were set out in the strategy originally. So things like a new climate adaptation plan for the service and a green spaces play strategy to help us plan for the future of outdoor play in the city. For more detail on progress with the strategy actions, they're all listed in Appendix 1. With details of what we've done towards delivering that action in 2023. So I'm going to leave it there, if that's okay, and hand over to you.
Thank you. I appreciate the brief introduction because we value extra time for questions. So thank you very much. Who would like to go first, members? Councillor Francis.
Oh, good morning. Thank you for your report on this. I just want to ask a couple of questions regarding to increase diversity of the workforce in parks and countryside team at every level in the service. It has been a shrinking team, and you're coming down to very few members that are probably approaching retirement now at this stage. And my concern is, why has it been left so long to identify that there is going to be a gap there in filling the capacity of that team? But also, have we explored the opportunities of having apprenticeships in there to pass on those skills? Because it is, it's a valuable skill to be able to do what they do with the trees and cutting down the trees and that. But also, my other part to the question is, what are we doing to maintain the existing trees? Because it's okay planting more trees, but You know, we don't realise a tree's been poorly maintained until after it's come down or it's split down the crown. So what are we doing about caring for trees that have been there for quite a long time? The last point I want to make, and then you can just drop this out of it. I just want to say a massive thank you to Keith and his team at up at Winmore Cemetery as well. They did a fantastic job. So please thank them for doing what they do with such dignity and sensitivity. And you know, they're just fantastic. But yeah, those are my two questions.
So just to come back, so there has been an apprenticeship scheme previously. So if you were to look at the age profile of the service, we have sort of a younger workforce and an older workforce and a bit of a gap in the middle. And we are looking to reintroduce an apprenticeship scheme probably for next year. But there's just been a lot of work looking at how we operate as a service and looking at sort of where we can cross skill as well to support other teams. And so all of that work is ongoing. We're also looking at how we use flexible retirement. So rather than people leaving us completely and us losing that knowledge, actually how we allow people to go down to a couple of days to allow that knowledge transfer to try and get us in a more robust position going forward. But there is a lot of work needed in terms of that sort of capacity management and how we build on that. But there is sort of a plan in place now. In terms of maintaining existing trees, we have just recruited 5 new staff into forestry. So they've started literally last week and this week. And some of the key things that they will be doing is more of a proactive tree inspection programme, so that we actually have sort of a document of the trees. It won't be every tree in the city because that wouldn't be possible. But for example, in our parks, it will be those that are kind of nearer to high footfall areas. And that will then happen on a regular basis. So that will be happening over the next 12 months. That there is already a process in place for trees sort of on the highway. But due to the sort of new staff and the recruitment, actually that will be a lot more proactive going forward.
Councillor McCluskey.
Thank you, Chair. My question is more about procurement. We're going through a process of having a new playground fitted in Western Flats Park in Wortley. The choice is extremely limited because it's down to one company, and that's what we're told. And that company had an even less choice when it came to accessible play equipment, to the point that it was, if we bought it and it broke, and it would break very quickly, and it would be left unusable. So I'm just wondering, are we looking at expanding how play equipment is procured within the council?
So we do have a key supplier that we work with, and obviously that there's a number of benefits to that. One, it was competitively procured and money is tight, so it allows us to get the best price. It also means that we have consistency across our playgrounds in terms of spares and replacements. However, we are able to go outside of that. So the example you give about accessible equipment, we can go outside. So if we're limited in certain pieces, we can look elsewhere. So they don't have absolute exclusivity. And I'm aware of the case that you're flagging, and I've done quite a lot of looking into what else we can do and how we start to improve our kind of design of play areas and accessibility. So we are doing some work on that as a service.
We've got a related question, because in the paper you refer to the Green Spaces Play Strategy. And we were wondering in our pre-meeting whether this was a joint project with Children's Services, or whether this was something which was a bespoke, discrete line of inquiry of your own, because we know that Children's Services have recently introduced a play strategy with a play champion, and obviously we wouldn't want them to be offering different proposals or recommendations to anything which is done within your service. So is this something which is a joint project, or can you clarify whether it's just something that you're working on yourselves?
So the plan is that it's led within the Green Spaces service. However, it will be done in conjunction with Children's, and it's a follow-on from their play sufficiency strategy. The person that's going to lead it for us actually worked for Children's as their play specialist at one point, so that we have good links established. But it is looking very specifically about play within our green spaces, not necessarily playground and fixed play, but natural play as well.
Thank you. I think we'd appreciate further involvement in that strategy as it's developed. So that would be very helpful. Councillor Stables.
Thank you, Chair. My question is about artificial pitches, and I wondered what our strategy is going forward around artificial pitches, and obviously the controversy really around the harm that they are doing to the environment in terms of plastic particulates that can get into the water streams. Also, in fact, that now there's knowledge about that with the climate heating up, the fact that they can overheat as well and be not usable, in fact, in the summer when it's too hot. But mainly around the environmental issues that they can cause.
So there's been quite a lot of research done on this within the Climate Emergency Advisory Committee, and I think we are still waiting for a formal position from government and also from Sports England. I think from memory, we'd written to those organisations as the SEAC committee to ask for a formal response, and they hadn't reached a position as yet. I think as a city, there's a real sort of dilemma because a lot of our play pitches get so waterlogged during the wet season, so you end up with a lot of time where community teams aren't able to play. I think the sports appraisal or the facility appraisal of the city shows that there is a shortfall in terms of amenity. So it's trying to balance that. There are 3G pitches still going in at the moment through sort of different planning applications that have been approved and gone through all those checks and balances. So we haven't taken a position one way or another, but we wouldn't, as a department, we wouldn't tend to put in 3G pitches because we wouldn't have the funding to do it. So it would come through planning or something like that if it were happening.
Thank you for that response. I do understand the pressures from both sides on this, and it's a really difficult equation trying to balance the whole thing. But I would like to think that as a council, we are leading the way on this, given that, you know, we were one of the first ones to announce the climate emergency in 2019, and that we're clearly, as a council, very concerned about the environment and see our responsibility in that area. So I'd like to think that we are a step ahead than the government, for example, on this. So will you be able to certainly let me know when you get a response from Sports England? I'd really appreciate that. Thank you.
Councillor Harrington.
It's just an add-on really, Polly, that there are a couple of planning applications that will be forthcoming shortly in the Wetherby ward about 3G pitches. They aren't in the process yet. They will be coming forward. So I'm hoping that you will keep an eye out for those and actually make the comment, especially if you get that update, because we are quite concerned about that. Thank you.
Councillor Maloney.
Just my usual about the safety of women and girls. I can see that in the report the research is complete, which is great, and action complete. So I'm just wondering, with that research being complete and action complete, what comes next? So what is the sort of the key finding from that? And then in sort of physical terms of our parks, where does that then go?
So yeah, the research is complete, and we did support that. It was undertaken in Leeds and around West Yorkshire, and we've proposed to put a new action in the strategy to use the new guidance that's been produced as a result of the research to improve access to parks and green spaces for women and girls. So we've got a commitment to do that. So it's about a range of things really. It's about park design. So it's things like having open sight lines. It's about providing facilities specifically for women and girls so they feel welcome. So we're basically, in the way that we're designing and managing our green spaces going forward and investing in them, it's something that we're taking into consideration. There's also some funding through Safer Streets for such investment. So we're looking at the best places to spend that.
Can we follow up on that a little? Because we had discussions here, didn't we, that the safety of women and girls is often concurrent with the needs of other parts of the equality characteristics, particularly disabled people. So there's mention here about the Leeds Quality Parks inspections that we do internally, and how more parks apparently are now meeting those criteria. So have we perhaps changed the criteria that we measure our parks on to take into account the learning which has happened about the safety of women and girls and EDI requirements?
The Leeds Quality Park Standard is based on the National Green Flag measure of a quality park, and they've added additional guidance to that around the safety of women and girls in parks. So that will be included in our training for our staff who do the assessments going forward.
Councillor Stables.
Sorry, it's just a follow on from that, actually. Within Wetherby Ward, we've got 6 town and parish councils, and I'm just wondering whether that information is being passed to the parish councils, which will be obviously very valuable when they're planning their parks, because when they're within Wetherby Ward at the moment, the town council is planning Sandringham Park. So it would be really useful to make sure that all that information is being passed through.
It was passed through following the last time we were at Scrutiny. So you could just check that they got it. Yeah.
Any further questions? Councillor Rowntree.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for a very comprehensive report. I'm pleased to learn that we're recruiting into the forestry team, because it's sort of clear that there are real capacity issues there. So that's really it's really good news that you've been able to take on some more people there. I would like to ask actually for your thoughts on a relationship with voluntary groups. Now, yeah, you have mentioned in the report the Green Spaces volunteer policy, and I'm just thinking from my own experience with a sort of friends group in my ward, how sort of confident are you that managing differences of views in the best way? I know the professional staff and the friends group do tend to rub up against each other on occasion, and but sort of anxious, obviously, that everybody works together and the peace is kept. Just be grateful for some thoughts on that. Thank you.
So we have the Leeds Park Forum, which meets, I think, quarterly, isn't it? Yeah. Which I go to as well. So all the friends of groups tend to come along to that and are represented. At that, nobody has raised any concerns with me. In fact, a couple of the different groups have kind of asked me to go back and thank members of staff because they've supported them when they've asked for help. So if you're aware of sort of specific issues or areas, I'm happy to look into it, but it's certainly not something that's been flagged through that Leeds Parks Forum.
Okay, thanks. Do all registered friends groups get an invitation to the Leeds Parks Forum then? Should that be in the communication?
Yes, they do.
It should be. Right. Okay, I've got something I can follow up there. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Seary.
Thank you. Just a quick one. Obviously, our parks are well used on a weekend, but we don't tend to have any staffing in there to manage like the litter and antisocial behaviour. Is there any plans to get some coverage over the weekend?
There isn't, given the current financial situation. There isn't a plan to introduce that at the moment.
Councillor Anderson.
It was a question about the financial sustainability of your department in terms of how you're reliant on funding that's the government don't give, you're not one of the services that has to be funded. So you're reliant on Section 106, SIL monies, etc. And whilst I totally, utterly, 100% support what you're trying to do, how are we going to fund you in the future?
So we're continuing to look for ways to increase income. So, for example, looking at different parks across the city and whether there are opportunities for secondary sales or kiosks. We're looking at how we can better use some of their estates that generate income and improve their sort of profitability in order to help support the community parks. So that's one of our key focuses over the next couple of years, is just to keep building on the work that's been going on for probably over a decade in terms of starting to develop that commercial side of the structure. But it is a challenge because there are, lots of demands. We do have antisocial behaviour and, demands in terms of where playgrounds are damaged and things that we don't have an obvious funding stream for. But we will continue to keep looking at alternative funding streams and trying to be as innovative as we can be to make every penny count.
Following on from that, I recall that we recently had exec board proposals around investment in Lotherton Park. And it was significant investment, and the justification for it was, well, we're able to charge for people to go to that park, and so therefore the investment will be an income generator in the future. Now, we certainly don't want charging to be introduced in all of our parks, and we've had discussions around car park charging before, haven't we? However, is there a danger that where you already have charging and you invest in the asset more, that we end up gilding the lily in some parks whilst others don't get any attention at all? And could that income which is generated through those investments be spread more equitably?
We look at the budget as a whole. And so if you take as an example Roundhay Park, if we weren't to generate the income we do for Roundhay Park, we would have to find another way to fund the staff that maintain it, because ultimately it still serves the local community. So but anywhere where we can raise income to support how we maintain those parks, it allows resource to be focused more on the community parks. I think we always benchmark. So anything where we do put costs or charges in or up, we benchmark with our competitors across other core cities, across the area. And we are always conscious of the fact that we still want to be accessible to as many people as possible. So we try and balance all of that. But ultimately, we're trying to make sure that we can maintain our community parks is our sort of driving force. And so sometimes if that means that we introduce kiosk or charge for ice creams or whatever it is, that helps us to keep functioning as a department.
Councillor Siri.
So any money that you raise is kept within Parks Department for improvements, yeah?
Any further questions? Councillor McCluskey.
It's just with, thank you, Chair. It's just with resources being so tight. We understand that all aspects of the council business is tight at the minute. Making use of friends of parks and volunteers, how can we encourage that more of that? Because we're increasingly relying on local communities to look after their local parks. Thank you.
So one of the things that we're just starting to look at is whether there's more of a role for the ranger team to play with that, in terms of, what would be the benefit if you were to increase the ranger workforce, in terms of attracting in the number of hours. So by paying somebody for 37 hours a week, actually what can they attract in terms of volunteers that help us supplement the work that we can do in our parks? So we're just having a look to see whether there is anything we could do around that, because that would be a key way to increase outreach and support communities, but we're early days on that to see whether there is a business case.
One of the suggestions, one of the friends groups, Friends of Western Flats, actually came up with is to encourage new volunteers. Could the volunteers access Leeds City Council staff benefits? I don't know what they are because we don't get any.
I'm not sure that there are that many staff benefits. I'm struggling to think of any. So, other than the pleasure of working here.
Ditto.
It does lead to the wider question, isn't it, in terms of involvement of interested parties in parks when there's less staff to organise that involvement, and it's a difficult tension, isn't it? So we were told before about the audits in the parks, and one of the things that was disappointing was the timescale involved, because it was intended to be one officer that was going around all the 30 community parks, and it would take, I think it was 4 years. Have we reviewed that alongside the stuff that you've talked about green spaces and play, how that's the job of one officer, I think, and they're going to be looking at opportunities around the city. So I would think that's another potentially 4-year programme to get round. Have we thought about how we could better involve either local councillors as conveners of local community activists to help with accelerating that process potentially?
Following the last scrutiny that we came to, we have speeded up the process of auditing our parks for accessibility. So we did actually do 20 last year because we had an intern in post. So that was really good and very convenient. She arrived at the right time. And we have tried to sort of engage like volunteers. So far we've got one, but we've been refining the process of doing the audits, and I believe my colleague met the volunteer last week. So hopefully, that'll speed up the access audits, and they should be done fairly quickly, I should have thought now. With regards to play, probably hand over to you, Polly.
The other thing I was going to say to accessibility, I think one of our asks is if any ward members or anybody on the committee has got volunteers that want to come and work with us, we're more than willing to sort of work with whoever's pointing our direction. We have struggled, if I'm honest, to find some of those volunteers, but we'd really appreciate that help. And we made that ask at exec board as well when we took the paper. In terms of play, there's one person leading on the strategy, but they will be supported by the area officers. There's already been an audit done of play from a sort of health and safety point of view. There is a team that maintain the playgrounds. So it's not one person going and auditing all playgrounds. And the report isn't about auditing all playgrounds. It's more about the concept of play and how we build it in. So it's not something that will just go on and on. It's more kind of an overarching approach, and as we come to renew playgrounds, it's something you can then look at in conjunction.
Councillor Franz-Meyer.
Thank you. It's just a suggestion. We've got at the Friends of Meanwood Valley Park. Yeah, I can't remember. Anyway, they did put the playground together, and we got some signs up there for BSL, for children to communicate with other children. And it would be nice if it could be recommended to other voluntary park groups, or if we can have them in our bigger parks, but just something to increase awareness, but also communication amongst children as well, and awareness.
We're already looking at that. Somebody from Humberside actually reached out to us. They're doing a national campaign, so we're having a look to where we can implement them. I didn't actually know Meanwood Valley Park had them already, so that's helpful to know.
Councillor Stables.
I think that's such a good idea in terms of linking in with volunteers. So there's a Boston Spa and Wetherby community green group who have got lots of volunteers. And you may well be aware, I've been working with Vicky Nuns in terms over a number of years, in terms of planting trees in the area. And it just seems to me such a good and logical idea to actually connect the two up better. So I'm just wondering how we take that forward in terms of, we've been putting forward ideas of where trees can be planted, and then it can take up to 2 years, believe it or not, to get permission to plant the trees in these areas. I'm not sure why it takes that long, but it has done. But, going forward, once decisions are made, rather than the parks team, the council paying for this to be done, in many cases, the volunteers would do the work. So it's just that connection I think is missing at the moment. So what I'd like to see is a joined up thinking on it, and a clear process of how this all works and who would be the key contacts and how we connect it all going forward. Thank you.
So it would maybe be interesting to have a sort of more in-depth conversation offline to just understand what's happened. I mean, some of the tree planting can take up to 2 years because some of the environmental approval processes that we have to go through can take that long in terms of surveys and things. It will depend on the size and scale of what you've proposed. So it's probably better if we have a look at some of the specific examples. Every year there's an opportunity for people to kind of put a pin on a map to sort of suggest tree planting ideas, and then the team work through those. But we are keen to find more tree planting locations. So yeah, if we can make that process slicker, I think that would benefit all of us.
Can I ask a question around culture? There's a reference in here to the Women of the World barn that appeared on Woodhouse Moor, which was quite a significant intervention. And I was just wondering, that would of course been significant for our park staff. Did you get any income from it while it was there?
Yeah, you asked that question before. I haven't found that out, I'm afraid, so I still can't answer that question. I'll have to look into that. I don't know the answer to that.
Well, in the same paragraph as well, it references the different community events for Leeds 2023, and quite a lot of them were held on local community parks because they are the natural focal points for the community, and some of them were very successful. We enjoyed ours in Rothwell. We had an outdoor cinema, and one of the things that we've noticed though is in the old community parks, there used to be formal structures to enable performances. So, for instance, you used to have bandstands. Now, they are very rare in most of our parks these days. But as one of the consequences and maybe a legacy of the Year of Culture, have we looked at potentially creating better performance facilities or infrastructure in our community parks to carry on that tradition of popular events? Because we do have bands in the park, don't we? And often when they come to Rothwell, they don't perform because it's pouring with rain. But if there was some cover, they'd be able to perform, and it would just be the onlookers that would be soaked.
I don't think it's anything that's been specifically looked at in terms of the legacy of 2023. I think it's something that would get picked up in terms of the plan on the page, if that's what the community are saying that they'd want in their park. There are still a few parks I can think of that do have those facilities, but we'd have to do that individual review as we do the plan on the page design and see what demands there are on the space.
Councillor McCluskey.
Can I just ask what the status of bowling clubs in public parks are? Because the reason I ask is about the bands the summer, the bands in the park in the summer. The bowling club won't let us access the toilets, and you've got a band that's come from Barnsley, and they're having to go to a local pub a mile away just to use the toilet. And I'm just wondering, do we have any authority over them to allow the public access to those facilities?
There's different agreements in place for every single lease, so it just depends what was negotiated up front. So if there's specific examples, we can have a look at the lease and see what's in there. But it's from what I've discovered as I've started to look at different leases, they're not all consistent there. It's just what was negotiated at the time.
Councillor Stables.
On another thread, just wondering about allotments, and I don't know if this falls under your area or not, but in Wetherby there are no allotments, which seems extraordinary for the size of the town, and clearly there's a big demand for them. So I'm just thinking that, I mean, there is an area that is being looked at developing, to be developed, which is Millennium Fields, whether that's, well, generally, clearly independently of that area, whether it's something specifically you might look at, but also generally in terms of allotments across the city, is this something that we are thinking about in terms of going forward, you know, allocating some space for, you know, in terms of in parks, maybe, is this something we're considering?
So I think when we went to exec board, we said we would help if people wanted to look at space within parks in terms of growing food. That is something that we've said we will look at with groups. But that wouldn't be like an individual growing their own food. That would be more about community growing, which is obviously different to allotments. In terms of allotments, it's probably an area I've not had quite as much time to get up to speed with as yet. But I know that there are parts of the city where we have overcapacity, other parts where there's waiting lists, so that there's a really sort of different picture across the city. But I'm happy to pick that up and have a look at it in a bit more detail.
If it's any help, I'm Vice President of Leeds Allotments Federation, and I can. And one of the things which you might want to note is the fact that the provision of allotments, when you have a parish council, it is automatically their responsibility to provide that. So you might want to have a further conversation with them in the first instance. One of the things that has controversially happened of late is that private allotment providers are sometimes turning up, but they have yet to demonstrate that they are delivering anything which is comparable to that which is delivered either by local authorities or by parish councils. So I will be very wary if anybody comes to you offering a solution. But if you become a member of the Leeds Allotment Federation, you'll have access to all of that information and guidance. Right, any further questions for our officers? Thank you very much for coming in. Appreciate you're very busy, and we really enjoyed what's in the report, and we look forward to working with you to delivering it in the future. Thank you. On to the next item. We are on to our end of year statement. It is open for discussion, but I appreciate that there might not be much. So has anybody got anything to raise going forward? And does Becky have anything to offer in terms of extra information other than what's in the papers?
Not really, Chair. It's just to note that this will then feed into the annual report, which will be considered by Council in July. So there will be the usual sort of bigger summary coming before the board in a couple of months. This is just a sort of interim statement that goes out from each of the boards.
Very good. Now we'll go on to the work schedule. Are we all happy that if we are on the board next year, that this is what we're going to have a look at? When we were looking at the schedule, we looked at what had been committed to in previous years and what we thought we might want to amend in terms of better reflecting the priorities and interests that members had expressed so far. So are we content? Very good. That's that done. So the other item is date and time of next meeting. 20th of June. I hope and look forward to seeing all of you then. Thanks very much. Bye bye.